What's up, guys? Aaron here, Curls in the Rack. Thank you for stopping by again for another DIY video, or if it's your first time to the channel, thank you for checking it out. I do a lot of DIY and a lot of product reviews on this channel, and 2022 has been the year of the DIY for me. As you can see, I'm not dealing with a whole lot of space in my gym. So I had the Rogue Echo GHD, which I really love it, but it takes such a big footprint, and I constantly have to think about what I'm putting where, and also, is there going to be enough room to use it? So I've made a lot of folding related things, and the rack is the focal piece of the gym. So you all know that, you probably have a rack. So if I can make something that's going to go on the rack and that I can easily put away when I'm done, I'm going to try to do that. And that's what I did with a lot of other stuff, but this is what I'm going to try with this one. As you can see, I haven't done it yet, but what I'm thinking is, I still have the GHD rollers and the foot plate, which is very heavy. And if you own one of these, or you have a Rogue Echo GHD, you want to put it up and not have to move it around a lot because it is very heavy. What I'm thinking of doing is, or what we're going to try to do, give it the old college try, is we're going to cut the rollers from the bracket. I'm going to use the bracket to put two of these on either side of it, so we still have that gap in the middle for your, and we can make a GHD that just has a bracket, slide it anywhere we want. Obviously, we're going to slide it far enough so we don't jam into the end of the lever arm here. But as you can see here, I have these new Vendetta Strength brackets for these Titan Fitness lever arms. So now I can lock these things into place anywhere I want, and they rock. By the way, I'm going to have a product review coming out soon if it's not already on the channel when you see this one. Now I have a base of where I can mount a GHD and use these rollers. So anyways, I'm going to cut this, use this piece on the end of this for the pads, and then I'm going to make another bracket for these rollers here. And this is the bracket I have to work with. Unfortunately, it's not long enough, so I'm going to extend it. So just so I'm going to have more surface space and it'll be stronger. And we'll see how it goes. So let's get started. Now, once you get it all disassembled, normally I would probably use my metal chop saw for this project, which I do usually, but it's not going to fit in there in the blade. It won't get to this section, so I'm going to have to do it by hand with the angle grinder and a cutting disc. So we will see how this goes. All right, so as you guys saw from the footage from last night, I was able to remove the roller portion from the bracket portion. It was hard to do just because there was not a lot of room to get the tool in there to do that. So what I did is I sort of cut it at like a pencil point, and then eventually I was able to just remove it. I sanded it down just so both parts were flush, and because I'm going to be welding on that one and I want it to be nice and flat when I put it on there. Now, what I'm going to use is this bracket. I'm going to weld it to here, and then I'm going to weld this bracket to this bracket after I cut it. Obviously I'm going to cut it first before I weld it. It'll just make more sense. So I will work on that after the kids go to bed tonight, and I'll see how much I can get done. So let's go to the next footage. Alright guys, now it is time to do our first weld. I went ahead and I sanded all the paint off of this guy. I have these magnets on each side, and I've evened it up, made sure it was straight by measuring it on all sides with this guy. And the reason that I do these first two welds and don't go crazy on the welding is because if it is off, and I'm gonna go take it in and check it on the rack just to make sure it's dead on, it's easier to remove just these two little micro welds than having to cut the whole thing apart. So I'm gonna go check, make sure it's even, and then I'll get continuing on the rest of the welding. All right, so everything looked good, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the rest of the welding, and then we'll go ahead and weld this bracket to the other one that's actually going to go over our upright. Now, one thing I noticed after I welded this, even though it's such a thick piece of metal, it tends to bow in just because the heat, it heats up and starts to flex. So what I did was I went ahead and threw these heavy duty clamps on here while it was hot to bend it back into place, because I don't want any gaps or any bowing when I'm done. So just something to keep in mind if you're welding anything. Now, I don't really need to do this many welds, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways because I generally like to over-weld things than under-weld them, and really there's no harm. I'm not trying to save any money in rods. So I flipped it, we're gonna go ahead and do this side and then let it cool off and see how it fits onto the upright. Hey,
What's going on?
making some fitness equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you making?
It's a roller bracket that goes onto the rack. It's like, I don't know if you've seen those guys, you put your foot through it, and it anchors you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it has rollers on it, but I cut it in half and I'm making it more lightweight. And then I'm going to use the other piece that I cut off of it for something else.
Oh,
And so, yeah,
good.
waste not, want not. All right, so now that we have it all cooled off after I gave it enough time to cool down, after welding it is time to throw it up on the rack and see how it looks and ultimately see if it can hold some weight. What I think I will do afterwards is I will strip all this paint off of here and then I will give it another coat of paint. I'm not going to powder coat this only because I do not have a big enough oven, so that's too bad. Hardly any move side to side. Yeah, I think this is going to work out nice. And now let's move on to the second portion, most importantly, the pads, what you're going to be laying over the top of or with your back on when you're doing your GHD type movements. So let's get started on that one tomorrow. Now, these that came from Cam Parts, these pads, are already pre-embedded with threading and holes, and they provide the bolts and the washers and the locking washers for them. But unfortunately, with this bracket, there's a big hole right here in the center, so I'm only going to be able to hit 2 of them unless I bring this out super far and have a giant gap in the middle, which I don't think that will be very comfortable. As it is, I'm going to run it just slightly, basically 3 inches, right, and give that gap in the middle. I did a little research, and that is the standard size for the hole in the middle of this portion. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure where these are going to be from this portion of it to the edge, and then I'm going to make my holes, right? And so the other holes will end up right here. I'm going to make a bracket, and I'm going to put some spacers in there. That way I'll be able to cinch this up, and if the bolts aren't quite long enough, I'm just going to get some other bolts. See, I believe these are 3/8 bolts. So the bracket will just cinch this up. I think it'll be easier than welding another piece of metal in here, and that is the plan. Okay, so what I've essentially done is taken my calipers here, and I've done some measurements. First of all, I did a measurement of where I was going to have this placed because it goes over, right? And we need to figure out how far we want to go in and how far we want to go this way with the pad. I'll have all the measurements up on the screen, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to take your measurements of the gap that's left over on this side and on this side, depending on where you want it. And then also it's going to hang over a tiny bit on the side as well. So get those measurements, and then we are going to measure, to the edge of the pad, all the way to the center of the hole, and then also this way from the side to the center of the hole. After we have our measurements down at the bottom portion, is we're going to subtract those from what we measure on here, because we don't need to go that far in. On the pad, it's going to throw it off because the pad is going to be hanging off the front here and hanging off the side and the back. And I just realized the camera was not on that whole time, but basically what I'm doing is I'm going to drill a couple pilot holes. I'm using some 3-in-1 oil here, and then we will get to drilling the 3/8 holes for the bolts. All right, guys, so at this point, they're super secure. I don't think that there is any reason for me to go ahead and put another bracket down there and put the other 2 bolts on. The only issue that I have now is a tiny bit of sway side to side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 pieces of UHM on either side of this, which will really cinch it up to this, and there'll be no wiggling. But what I am going to do, additionally, is I'm going to put 2 more holes a little farther in. So that way I can put these things together, because if I want to use this thing, say, to do, you know, GHD sit-ups or something like that, maybe I don't want that gap. Maybe I want to use this on the floor as you know, a pad to put under my back when I'm doing leg presses with the lever arm. Who knows? More options is better. So I'm going to do 2 more holes so I can cinch these guys together, and then we'll see how it works. Also, guys, one thing I should mention before I forget is the fact that in order to have this thing all the way to the end, you are going to have to remove the other stopper that's on the back side of the lever arm, which I don't know really why it's on there to begin with, but if you have the Titan Fitness lever arms, they put 2. My guess is because you could switch the bracket around on the rack and either use it on one side or the other, so they decided to give you 2. But it's super easy to take off. Star key, and it's off, right? So there's just 2 little holes there, but this thing will slide up and pop in all the way to the end. Okay, so now it is time for the UHM plastic. Now these are extremely cheap. You can get like 5 of these on Amazon. I'll have links to everything in the description that I used in this video, whether it be tools, supplies, where you can get them. And I just cut out 2 pieces like this. I made sure that when I put them in there, the bracket would still fit on there, and reduce the sway side to side a little bit, because it's not really going to be an issue when you're up there using it, but getting up there onto it, you know, pushing on one side and pushing on the other might throw you off a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clamp these once I take this off, and then I'm going to drill holes all the way through. That way this pin can still go through the UHM all the way down wherever you want it to be. And also keep in mind that if you don't want to buy any UHM plastic, you may already have some of this black Gorilla Tape that you use for your mats. Just use this. You can throw this on there, that side too, and then drill the holes the same way. Only difference is that over time, if your garage gym gets hot, it becomes kind of sticky, and it's going to get all over the pins as they go through. So just something to consider, but this is always another cheap option. And essentially at this point, you are going to take the other one that you cut and you can put it somewhere, line it up, all the holes, and then drill through that one, so you don't have to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side, or rather use those holes again. And then all I did was I went ahead and I glued it, some pins in it, just to make sure we're lined up on all the holes, and then I clamped it, and now we'll just wait. All right, guys, after I had everything put back together and I eventually went ahead and painted it, I do want to let you guys know that I went ahead and made a DIY foot plate to go on here that was standalone. That way it wasn't locked into being used with the rollers. I can throw the rollers on the back side, I can throw this on the back side. It doesn't really matter, and it doesn't add to the weight because it's a separate piece. Plus, it's very light because I used wood for portions of it. I used grip tape on here with angle iron, painted it, made brackets on here. I'll show you that on part 2 of the video, but basically this is how it works. So basically it goes up before you go ahead and put on your foot rollers. Foot rollers go right through the middle here, and they pin like this, And then you have your foot plate and you have your rollers. Put your GHD pad on and you are good to go. So let's go ahead and go through some of the exercises, and part 2 will come out tomorrow on YouTube. So look for that if you want to make the foot plate.